All right, and welcome to Now This Is Podcasting. I'm your host, Connor, and I'm here with Jaden.
Yee!
And we just went on a little Cineventure. We just watched Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yeah, intense.
This is your second time watching it.
Yeah, I watched it opening night too.
Yeah, and this is my first time. Obviously, like one of the most anticipated movies of the year, and it seems like it's gonna like just crush the box office. I mean, this is like bigger than Dune was even. Like this is gonna be the biggest movie of the year.
Well, not only that, they don't have HBO Max release for Spider-Man either.
That's true. This didn't do like a Disney Plus release either.
They won't have this on Disney Plus either. They don't have any of the other Spider-Mans on there because Sony has the rights to them.
Oh, you're so right.
Yeah, they usually put them like Showtime or something like that.
That hadn't even occurred to me that this wouldn't appear on there because it just feels so Marvel to me.
Yeah,
because
it is.
Yeah. It's almost like Sony just gets stamped on like on the end.
Yeah, it's like here's our brand. Make sure you know that we are the ones who made this movie. Yeah,
like, we own this.
Yeah.
Marvel just makes a better version of it.
Yeah.
So, what is your first impression of this movie? How did you feel about it?
It's great. It's everything that I wanted it to be. Definitely did not disappoint me whatsoever. So I'm very, very pleased with it.
Right. So this is directed by John Watts. He did the other two Spider-Man.
And he's doing the Fantastic Four too.
I did not know that was the thing. Dude, you keep more up to date with Marvel stuff than I do. I like it because like I don't do a ton of research at least into like spoilers and leaks and stuff. So I don't really look ahead to any of that because I'm nervous it'll ruin a movie for me. I didn't know Fantastic Four was going to be a thing.
Oh yeah. They I think they have it slated for like 2024 is when they want to release it.
That'll be great because it would be nice to finally have a good version of Fantastic Four in theaters. They
have to nail the cast.
Yeah,
you can mess that up pretty easy.
Everyone like has their own fantasy cast for that, where it's like you have Emily Blunt
and John Krasinski. That's like everyone's favorite.
Yeah, right.
They like updated the comic look of Reed Richards, and he looks kind of like John Krasinski now.
Yeah. I feel like you have to do it, otherwise you'll just get a bunch of upset, fanboys who are like, I imagined this, put it in the movie.
Yeah,
so,
which is, I mean, that's what's probably going to happen.
Yeah. I would like to see that, but no, that's cool. I didn't know he was going to be directing that. I will say I like this movie. It feels different than other Marvel movies. It's really weird, kind of the way it is like filmed. It feels to be like different in different parts, which I like because I think the last Marvel movie we did was Black Widow, and that really just hit all the beats of like Marvel movie, like action set piece, witty line, fun characters, which still does it for me because I just like the spectacle of Marvel movies. So when we don't have Calvin on this podcast because he's not a big Marvel fan,
he'll just talk on them the whole time.
But I think this actually would have been one for him to go watch because it feels a little different than the other ones, and it still has your big action set piece at the end. Of course,
and all the humor and stuff like that's still in it.
Yeah,
but it's.
We'll get into more of the aesthetic, but yeah, this movie it feels weird and it feels a little
very
different.
Yeah,
which is nice, and I like that a lot. And again, it's just nice. I'm into Marvel movies, and I love like all I like the fan service. I like, all the little bits I can pull from and be like, oh, I remember it from this, or I remember it from that. And people who like dog on people or poo-poo watching these movies because they're not like good movies or they're not like real cinema. It's like, then just don't watch them and stop giving the people who enjoy the spectacle a hard time.
Yeah.
Because I do. I just like the spectacle of this. And this movie felt to me like it had the same like kind of hype as like Civil War did because there's a lot of different characters coming in.
Yeah. I feel like it has a lot of the same hype as like Infinity War and Endgame as well because there's a lot of characters in that and it's like a culmination of things. And I mean, everyone knew who follows Marvel and stuff like the multiverse is happening. And
right.
All that's going on, and with the previews of Doc Ock and Green Goblin and Electro coming in, like
that's what I'm saying. There was a lot of hype around this that I didn't get when like Eternals was coming out.
Yeah.
I went and saw that, and I didn't enjoy it at all.
Yeah, I still haven't seen it.
But yeah, it's a Marvel movie, but it didn't get the same like pomp and circumstance as Spider-Man does.
Yeah,
obviously Spider-Man is a huge deal, like one of their biggest properties.
Yeah, probably their biggest.
Yeah, so this is going to be a big movie, and I think it's fine. I had fun with it. A little bit of a bummer though, like towards the end, like the climax, the reel just stopped. Like the whole movie just stopped.
Oh my goodness!
And I've never experienced this at a theater before, but some of the staff came in and they're like, "We have bad news." Like.
They didn't say have bad news. They said we have an announcement.
Yeah.
And which I eternally thought was like Tobey Maguire or someone is here. I was like, in Westminster, Colorado on a Sunday? This is awesome.
Tom Holland is here to thank you for coming to watch Spider-Man.
Yeah.
It turned out to be bad news. They said that they had some break-ins into cars that were parked behind the theater, and of course I parked behind the theater, so I had to leave for like 4 or 5 minutes to run and make sure my car hadn't been broken into. So I missed a little bit of the climax, but it was okay.
Yeah,
I
you
got
didn't
back
miss,
for the
you didn't
big
miss very
parts.
much at all. So
But yeah, no, I like this movie, and I like that it felt different than like Black Widow.
yeah, which it definitely does. I like that it felt different than the other two Spider-Man movies that Tom Holland
For sure.
was in, because I'm not a super huge fan of them. I thought that they could do like way better. Like I thought that Jake Gyllenhaal and Michael Keaton were both very good in them and stuff like that. But I just felt like they could have done way better than what they were.
Right.
Yeah. I felt like it's always a little bit too much too, because like Spider-Man, like one of his things is all the difficulties he's constantly facing with himself, and being like a poor kid from Queens, and he's got like this Iron Man suit that helps him out all the time, and
Yeah.
and like all this technology to like that he benefits from. I'm like, that's just kind of, it's not the Spider-Man that I know.
Right.
You know
right.
what I mean?
Yeah, which is fine though, because it's good to each iteration of Spider-Man kind of seem to have their own feel. So him having like technology stuff never bothered me, because he can be a different Spider-Man than
which
like
it
Tobey
absolutely
Maguire
is,
or Andrew Garfield was.
Which
so.
is good too, that they didn't just like repeat the same stuff as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to move in without like spoiling stuff. We'll like talk about the aesthetic. I talked about how this movie kind of feels weird, and it's like it's filmed weird. It's like in the first portion of the movie, it feels like kind of really fun, quirky movie, like really kind of goofy, and you have your three friends, just kind of joshing around, and then it kind of gets more dramatic because it brings up like Peter Parker's identity has been revealed and everything like that. But it still just feels like kind of buds, like they're trying to figure out they're going to get in college and stuff. And there's also like really interesting shots of like the camera will be like way back, and it'll just like zoom in really quickly on Tom Holland Peter Parker doing something. It happens a couple times, and I was like, it was an interesting shot to me, because the other two movies that doesn't exist at all.
It never happens. Yeah, there's definitely some weird shots. And like you were saying before, it's different than any other Marvel movie that I've seen, at least directed, like done by the MCU or anything. Yeah,
that's why it seemed like fun, quirky, because those are shots that like imagine like Kevin McAllister like in Home Alone, or like a quick zoom in on him, like when he realizes he's home alone, and it's like it's like a fun shot, and those appeared a couple times in this movie, which is why it kind of had a fun feel to like the camera work in it. And then there's other shots later on of Doctor Strange where he's like shrouded in darkness, and he's like, it's almost like film noir feel, because it's just a little bit of light across his eyes. And then there's other like elements, like there's a kind of feels like a horror fight scene later on in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like some really kind of interesting elements going on with like how they filmed it. That's why I say this movie feels different than other Marvel movies and even the other Spider-Man movies, which is fascinating to me that John Watts directed all three of these.
Yeah, and this one
feels different than those,
because the first two are pretty similar. There's, I think, like Far From Home. The second one is a little bit more like epic, I guess, but it's not. I don't know. It still feels like it's the same style of movie as the first one. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like, this doesn't feel like it's like even part of like the same trilogy almost.
No. I totally agree. But this movie just feels so different. I think a big part of that is just this interesting camera work and stuff that we don't see in these other movies. I guess now we should move to spoilers, because I want to talk about the characters and
give you guys like 15 seconds here to realize if you keep listening and you haven't seen this movie, you need to stop.
And the other thing is, every review we do it's
going to have spoilers.
It's always been a spoiler. We're not a non-spoiler podcast. We watch these movies and then kind of want to dive into them deeper.
Yeah.
But this has never been
watch the movie before you listen to the podcast.
Yeah. I just think,
also, if you haven't seen it yet, go
check
do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Moving into the characters, I think it kind of deals, you have all these villains show up. Like Doctor Strange is going to cast this spell for Peter to erase everyone's memory of Peter Parker. That way, like, his friends and family don't have to deal with like all this, all these problems that are kind of cropping up on them, because
they're not getting into college.
Right.
Yeah, they have to move because they're just getting swarmed by paparazzi and all that stuff.
Yeah, like there are consequences for the people around him, even though they've done nothing wrong. They're just associated with Peter Parker, so there's all these issues going on. When Peter initially goes to Doctor Strange to cast this spell, it feels like he just does it, no problem, like no questions asked. He's like, yeah, sure, yeah, we'll do it. And then there's like some problems that go on with the spell, because he keeps needing to change it to make sure one or two people remember him. Like MJ and Ned remember him, and he wants
Aunt May to remember,
right,
because he doesn't want to deal with her finding out again, which is, come on,
yeah,
selfish, buddy.
So you have all these like little changes that go on in the spell that ends up kind of ruining the spell, and that's sort of like the catalyst for the story that like kicks off the conflict in this movie, that now all these other people who know about Peter Parker kind of end up migrating into his universe.
Yeah.
But Doctor Strange still just does it kind of no problem. He's like, yeah, no consequences. Like, I'll do this spell for you.
He's like, nice to know you, kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the movie, the way to fix it is for Peter Parker to be like, do the spell again, but do it right. Make everyone forget me.
It is a little bit different. So he says he wants people to not know that he is Spider-Man in the beginning. And then at the end, he's like, I don't want anyone to know who Peter Parker is. So there's like a little bit of a difference.
I suppose you're right. Okay.
But at the same time, like, Doctor Strange still would have forgot him the same.
Yeah, you're right, because he just knows Spider-Man. And
yeah.
So I guess maybe I just think of Spider-Man and Peter Parker, they're just synonymous.
Yeah.
So if you forget one, like they're the same character. But you're right, I guess.
Yeah, because Happy still knows Spider-Man at the end. So I would assume that like the adventures still happened with him, but he just never met Peter Parker. He only met Spider-Man.
Okay, that's interesting. That makes the end work better for me, because
it still was sloppy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because at the end, Doctor Strange is like, okay, I'll do it, but everyone you love, everyone you know will forget you. And Peter's like, do it. Like, I'm willing to make that sacrifice. He's willing to take on that great responsibility.
Yeah. But Doctor Strange is like, but I don't want to forget you. Basically, he's sad about it, but he was going to forget him anyways.
Yeah.
He didn't care before. Yeah.
That was just the way his character operates in this movie didn't make sense to me, because he is like really nonchalant about it at the beginning, and then it's like a big moment emotionally for him at the end. But now that you brought that up, that makes much more sense to me about there's a difference between Peter Parker and Spider-Man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's still weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a good thing that he's not in the movie too much either.
I liked how they worked him out of it pretty quick, because this still needs to be a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like Doctor Strange just helped drives the plot. Which,
right.
I mean, we don't really need, because there's so much multiverse stuff going on already in the MCU.
Which is why this movie is great if you're tracking all that stuff. Like if you watched Loki, I love like kind of the visual hints of like, because there's like that white kind of splitting of the sky, which looks like the main multiverse like timeline.
Yeah.
Like when they're at that castle at the end of Loki.
Yep.
And so there's like visual elements that look a lot like stuff we saw in Loki. And I love just tying all that stuff in, which again is why I just love the spectacle of these movies. And if you're keeping up with all of it, they're a ton of fun to watch.
I mean, Doctor Strange has mentioned too, like, he's like, this shouldn't have happened. He's like, it doesn't make any sense, like, why these guys would be here, even throughout the spell or whatever, which is like, it's because Loki opened up the multiverse is why this is happening.
I also just think of it as like, it's not really a big deal why all this is happening.
Yeah.
It just, you need some element of your story to pull all these characters in.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter if it's really kind of shoehorned or not really
matter.
explained.
Yeah.
Because the only thing people really want to see is like what you saw in the trailers with all these villains showing up. That's what people want to see.
Yep.
So I don't really care if there isn't like it's not like explained well, because that's not really the point. The point is for me to see Spider-Man punch people.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And to punch people, we've got to see him punch in the past, which was, awesome.
All right, and so speaking of kind of stuff that just kind of gets explained away, character I want to talk about is Jamie Foxx's like Electro's back in this one, and it's the Electro from the Andrew Garfield
Amazing Spider-Man
universe.
2. Yeah, 2014.
And I love that they just like, oh, last time I saw you, you had a bad teeth and a comb over. I think the only explanation you get for why he looks just like Jamie Foxx now is he just says like, oh, there's different power here. I like the power here. And that's it.
Which is fine.
I
don't care, because it was awfully done in Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, and he is nothing like the character from the Andrew Garfield movies either.
Nope, he's just Jamie Foxx.
Jamie Foxx. Like he has that great line where he's like, "Are we just gonna ignore that I'm out here butt-ass naked?" I was like, "That's just Jamie Foxx. That's all it is."
I was like, "Oh, that's Django." It's the same.
I love that there's like a nod to all the people who know how he was in those movies, how he looked, and all the kind of hate that people have for those movies, and then to just be like, kind of give a nod to it and then just immediately move on.
Yeah.
I think that's the only way you can do it in a way that it's the only way that makes sense to treat him, because Lord knows I don't need like some big explanation on why Electro looks different.
Yeah, I don't care.
Yeah. And I certainly don't want to see the goofy version of Electro from the Andrew Garfield movies.
Yeah.
So,
I'm happy that he wasn't blue. I'm happy that all that stuff changed.
Oh, he looks great too. I love when he like shooting lightning and you get the lightning around his face.
Like the comic book mask.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's just
cool.
a great nod to it.
Yeah.
His character design is so much better in this than it was in the
Yeah.
in those movies, and it is funny too because he's talking to Sandman, who is from the
Tobey Maguire.
right, and they're talking about like he's like, oh, I fell in a vat of eels,
Yeah.
and he's like, oh, I fell in a large hadron collider or something
Yeah.
like that, and they're like, oh, you got to be careful what you fall into.
Yeah.
It's just fun nods that, like, again,
It's silly, like,
yeah,
and it's comic book stuff. Like,
Yeah.
it's fine. And like, this is people talk shit about that. It's like, oh, it's just an excuse for them to get their powers. I'm like, that's what
every comic book has.
is. Yeah.
It's always just something happens and they get powers. That's
Yeah.
it. And it doesn't really matter. What matters is what these characters do after they get the powers.
Yep.
And, origin stories can be fun and stuff, but I mean, you want to talk about origin stories. Spider-Man doesn't even have an origin in the MCU.
No, he just talks like, ever since I was bit by that spider.
Yeah.
But we all know, so it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Like,
That's just a story that's so in the zeitgeist that, like, I don't need to see it again. And I
we
don't
do
need to
find
see-
out that Uncle Ben never existed in this universe.
Yeah.
In this movie, yeah.
Let's talk about Doc Ock now. He's like the first villain to show up.
Yep.
And he's got a great reveal and everything. I just love the tentacles popping up and everything.
Yeah.
And so it's him from the Tobey Maguire movies, and he's still got his brain fried and taken over by the tentacles and everything. And part of like the whole story here is that Peter is trying to fix all of them because he knows that it's kind of revealed that if they all get sent back to their universe, it's like right before they died.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to save them from that, which is great. Peter Parker's altruistic. Spider-Man's a great hero. Of
Yeah.
course he would do that, even at like the risk of like going against Doctor Strange. He wants to follow through with this.
Yeah. It's because like none of them are actually bad people. They just had like bad stuff happen to them that somehow changed their brains into bad people.
Yeah. And I think Doc Ock I think it's smart that they picked him to be the one who has like kind of the turn to being good, because really his only problem is that this machine has taken over. And he talks about, he's like, oh, these voices in my head and everything. So when that gets fixed, it makes sense that, because he's not a bad, evil scientist initially. It's when this chip goes out in his head, and that's what turns him evil. So I liked his turn from like villain to hero. Yeah, it's just cool to see Alfred Molina look. He looks really young.
Yeah, he looks the same as he did in Spider-Man 2, kind of.
His de-aging wasn't as good as Willem Dafoe's de-aging.
Not even close.
It still looks. We can move on to Willem Dafoe then and the Green Goblin, because like this is the best version of de-aging I think I've seen.
Yeah, it looks amazing. Like he looks the same as he did in 2002 when he portrayed Green Goblin for the first time.
I wonder if it's maybe because he just has such an iconic face and
That
look,
might be it.
and
yeah.
so it's like maybe it's easier to kind of replicate all that stuff because it's just so something like we see in Willem Dafoe in like every movie he's in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's so animated in his facial features. So I wonder if maybe part of helping his de-aging is that there's just such a wide range of things you see on his face.
Yeah.
So I wonder maybe that plays a role.
Probably.
I don't know anything about the visual effects
Me
that goes
either.
into it. It's stunning in this movie though. Like, he looks great in it.
Yeah, it's amazing. He does a great job in this movie. Every time he's on screen, he just
Absolute
steals
scene
the
stealer.
entire scene every single time.
I have, especially since we talked about The Lighthouse, I have grown to appreciate Willem Dafoe so much. He is a really, really good actor.
Yeah.
And the fact that he can pull off like goofy Green Goblin in kind of fun Spider-Man from like the Tobey Maguire movies.
Yeah.
And then he's also kind of plays a much darker version of that in this movie, and it all still works for me. Like, Willem Dafoe can be in any movie.
Yeah, it needs to do fine.
We
Just,
watched.
stay away from Aquaman, dude, and don't do that again.
Oh man, I kind of forgot he was in that.
Yeah, because he doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not Willem Dafoe's fault. That's just a bad
It's
character.
just a really bad movie.
Right. We
yeah.
saw him in Nightmare Alley we just did a podcast on that, and he's not in that movie much, but when he is, it's like he's just got this great charisma on screen. And yeah, Willem Dafoe can be in anything. He's on the level of like Florence Pugh to me. Put them in movies. They're just so great.
I will go watch them if they're in it. Yeah, he does a great job. I like that they got rid of the helmet or mask pretty quickly in it too, because I think it's goofy.
It fits really well into the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans.
Yeah.
Where those are really comic booky and fun.
Yeah.
And this movie, like I said, seemed to want to have a darker feel, especially how it treats Tom Holland's Peter Parker.
Yeah.
This movie wanted to take on a darker note. And so yeah, I think to have that mask would not play as well as it did in the Sam Raimi movies.
Silly, yeah.
And I like it too. Like, you could think of it like thematically for that character is when he gets rid of the mask, it's like now he's not afraid of that persona anymore. He's not hiding like behind the mask anymore.
Yeah.
Like that's just who he is. He is the Green Goblin now. Like there is no Norman Osborn anymore.
Yeah.
He's just the Green Goblin now. And so getting rid of the mask, you could think about that like symbolically, like he doesn't need it anymore. Like that's just who he is now. So he doesn't need to like put it on to become Green Goblin anymore. Might be reaching a little bit with that one, but I think you could think of it like working out like thematically for that character.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, yeah. In his look when he has like the hoodie on or whatever and gets shredded, I'm like, oh, okay, so that's more comic book accurate too, because he does have the hood on in the comic book, but he's also like an actual Green Goblin.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so weird. One thing about him, and I think this is like one of the best elements of the movie where I kind of talked about it taking on a real horror feel, is like Peter has like that spidey sense that goes off, and I like the sound design of it a lot. Like all kind of the noise kind of drops out, all the volume is really taken
It's
low.
like muffled a little bit or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you really feel like you're in Peter's head for this, and it's like it felt like he was trying to figure out like who was going to be the bad guy in that moment, because he's surrounded by villains essentially.
Yeah.
And and then he shoots the web at Green Goblin, and that's when you kind of get the reveal. He's like, "Oh, I've always been the Green Goblin, and like Osborn's not here anymore," and that leads to like this really great kind of horror feel action set piece where him and Peter Parker are fighting.
Yeah.
And he's like, he feels much different than the Tobey Maguire movies, because I know he's got like that super serum and he's like really strong, but he's like throwing Spider-Man around.
The hand-to-hand combat they go through in this is awesome. Like the fight scenes between Willem Dafoe and Tom Holland are very good.
And it's really creepy because it's like not well lit, and it's like part of it takes place in a hallway, and like they're silhouetted a lot, so it has a really creepy feel to it.
He's just smashing through freaking floors too. He's like, oh, on to the next floor.
It feels like
it's dropping him.
It feels like extra violent for what we've seen from Spider-Man before.
Oh, absolutely, because Tom Holland's like going ham on him too. He's hitting him hard.
Right.
Like, yeah. Because I think like you can tell at first, like I feel like he's like pulling his punches a little bit. He's like, okay, he's like, I need to fight this guy for real. Yeah.
It feels, which I think is supposed to kind of lend to this idea, and so we can move on to Tom Holland's Peter Parker now. It lends to like the idea that he's like a darker, and he wants revenge now because Aunt May has been killed by Green Goblin's glider, and I think that's I thought it was a pretty well acted death scene.
Oh, I thought so too. I thought
I
thought him and Marissa Tomei both did a great job in that scene.
Yeah, and like something's wrong with her, but like she's trying to be brave. And,
because I think I'm good. Yeah,
like she needs to be that for him. And then you find out like she's like really wounded, and I think Tom Holland's actually like that's some of the better acting I've seen, especially just because I mostly know him from Spider-Man.
Yeah,
and usually it's these are like kind of melodramatic and fun movies, so to see him like really like emote, I thought he did great.
Yeah, he's like, oh, look at me, man, what are you doing? Look at me. Like I'm just like, oh man, that's rough. Like that's his this is like basically his mom. Like,
right. Yeah, and so I keep saying Tom Holland Spider-Man, and that's because of course we have probably the big reveal that I think everyone kind of saw coming, is that we also get Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man and we get Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
And I like how they're introduced. I think you could have done them in like their own kind of scene or whatever, because you have.
I feel like you steal a little away from Andrew Garfield.
Yeah. Because you have him initially introduced, because Ned he has magic powers and he gets the sling ring from Doctor Strange.
There's fan theories that Wong's been his dad this whole time.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Huh. And again, that's another part of the story where there's not a big explanation. There's just kind of a throwaway line where he's like, oh, my grandma always said I had the magic in me, or the magic was in our family.
He's like, I get tingling in my fingers, and Dr. Strange's like, you should go see your physician.
Yeah. This movie is full of just little things to just let you know, like, there's going to be goofy stuff going on in this movie. We're not going to take the time to explain it to you because you're just here to have fun.
Yeah.
And I'm glad, again, because I don't need a big scene of him figuring out how to use the sling ring, and
just does it on accident. Yeah.
And it's a fun way to introduce the other Spider-Man.
Yeah, he does it, and he's like looking for Peter Parker, and like he does it, and instantly you see Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man suit.
Right.
Which like they didn't notice at first, and like the first time I saw it, like everyone instantly, as soon as you saw him, they cheered.
Yeah.
In this theater, everyone like waited till like he took off his mask, and like, oh, it's Andrew Garfield. I was like,
right.
Very clearly the entire time that is Andrew Garfield.
Yeah. I thought it was funny. Yeah, because the theater cheered and everything. Those movies are like critically not liked. Like in Andrew Garfield is not the problem in the Amazing Spider-Man movies. It's just like bad writing and bad villains.
Yeah, I mean the first one is definitely much better than the second one.
Oh right, yeah.
But yeah, the second one is just Jamie Foxx. It's not Jamie Foxx's fault either.
No, it's bad writing.
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting that, and if you want to cheer for Andrew Garfield because he is the best part of those movies, then that's good. Cheer for him. But it was just funny, like these movies that are pretty much universally not liked, and they did cheer for the lead actor in it. I thought it was kind of funny. And then of course Tobey Maguire gets a big cheer when he comes on screen.
Yeah, a massive cheer. Yeah, and you guys, I'm sure a lot of you saw the memes on the internet. It's like when Tom Holland enters, like people are kind of clapping. It's like when Andrew Garfield enters, people cheering, and then it's like when Spider-Man comes on screen, everyone freaks out. Yeah. And that's most people's original. I mean, I guess not most people, like many people's original like on-screen Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's I think for a lot of people like that's the definitive Spider-Man. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people, especially like kids who are going to grow up with Tom Holland as Spider-Man, they're gonna love him. But for me, like didn't you say? I think you told me that movie came out 15 years ago.
The last one, Spider-Man 3, came out 15 years.
Oh, that is wild to me.
The first one came out. What's the date today? It's
the 19th.
It's the 19th. All right. So in like 12 days, it'll be 20 years.
Wow, that's wild to me.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel that old.
Yeah, it doesn't.
And that's why Tobey Maguire is like my Spider-Man, because I was a kid when those came out.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the reveals. It's cool that they get to come in. And then when they meet up with
Tom
Holland, there's like another big emotional moment. And, he's just gone through losing Aunt May and everything. But this movie, like, there's a big chunk of it towards the end where it's just a lot of very big emotional scenes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I started getting lost. I was like, okay, I get it. Like, this is a big deal for everyone. And they just kind of seem to keep going. And I think those could have been paced out a little better. That was sort of the part. It's like we just had Tom Holland's big, like, and Aunt May's big death scene.
Yeah.
And then he's still going on about, like, oh, I don't want this responsibility. And that's when you get, like, the line. Because he repeats from Aunt May.
And they all repeat it at the same time. Like, with great power comes great responsibility.
Which, like, of course that was going to happen. So.
Yeah, it's like, well, that's what Uncle Ben said right before he died.
Yeah. I think you probably could have just put that more towards the beginning of their talk, but they all have to be like, oh, well, I couldn't save Gwen, and she's my MJ. And
now
like,
he's like not pulling his punches and stuff. Is Andrew Garfield like a dark Spider-Man?
Yeah.
Neat. I
like
want to see that.
Yeah, I'm interested in that. And then you have Tobey Maguire, who's talks about Uncle Ben and wanting to, like, he tracked down his killer and he got what he wanted. It just felt like just get to that part quicker than kind of dragging out your dramatic scenes too long. That would be kind of my knock as far as like the drama in this goes. It's like, okay, I understand all the emotion built into this movie. Let's get to punching now. So now we've gotten all our Spider-Men together, and it's fun to see kind of the science side of them come out. And I think that's more something that happened in the Andrew Garfield, the Amazing Spider-Man movies. It didn't happen so much in Tobey Maguire's movies.
No, it just kind of says like, oh, he's smart.
Yeah, and then
all he does is take pictures.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Tom Holland does tinkering in his movies, but he has all this Stark tech to do it, so it's a little different than like what Andrew Garfield is doing.
Yeah.
But it's cool to just see them all in the room, like, oh, I'll handle this thing, and I'll handle this, and this is how we're gonna cure.
And they're all like working in the lab together, and Ned's all like, "Hey, Peter," and they're all like, "Yeah." They all answer. He's like, "Oh, sorry, Peter Parker." They're like, "That's
all of us."
Yeah. They're like, dude, you gotta be like specific.
This movie doesn't lack any of the comedic moments that are just inherent in every Marvel movie.
Yeah.
And I thought they were all good bits.
Yeah, they were. All of the comedy in here is just exclusively fan service.
Oh yeah.
Like when Toby like shoots webs out of his wrist, and because Tom Holland grabs his web cartridges and he's putting them in his web shooters, and Tom Holland's like, "What are those?"
Right.
He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "They're my web shooters." He's like, "Oh," and he just shoots webs out of his wrist. They're both like, "What the fuck?"
That came out of your body?
Yeah.
That's part of, again, like the fan service but it's still fun for me.
Yeah.
Each Spider-Man kind of gets their like day in the sun in this movie to kind of reference stuff from like their universe and their movies. And so like all that stuff is fun to me. It's not like eye rolling, like one of the worst bits of fan service I've seen is in Rogue One when like R2-D2 and C-3PO just kind of show up for no reason.
Yeah.
And you see like the Rogue One ship fly off. There's no reason for them to be in that.
Nope.
But it works like comedically to have all these Peter Parkers kind of finding out like little quirky bits about themselves. Like that's all fun fan service. Like that's how fan service should be.
It's like, what, you've been to space, dude? Like, and it works out really well. And like you can see like Andrew Spider-Man's a little bit more emotional than the rest of them. He's like, I've always wanted like brothers. Like, I love you guys. And he's talking about, he's like, man, you guys got to fight aliens. He's like, I'm lame. And that's obviously like him referencing to his movies, as they were not as well received as
I think there's definitely a lot of like hints dropped in this on how people look at the movies they were in. For sure.
And I mean, he's all like, I'm lame, and Tobey Maguire's like, dude, you're amazing.
Yeah,
he calls him amazing like 12 times, like because that's the title of his movies. Yeah.
Again, that's all fun to me.
Yeah, and the same thing with like he's like I'm Peter 3. He's like, yeah, you're Peter 3. He's like, I guess I'm Peter 3.
Yeah. So we've built all the devices. We're gonna have our big fight at the end. So this is kind of the part that I missed, was the beginning of that fight, because I had to go and check and make sure my car hadn't been broken into.
Yeah.
How does that all start out? Because I kind of came in where they're now kind of all working together, like to single out. Because you have you have Electro, you have Sandman,
and Lizard,
and it seems like they're all like kind of teaming up one by one to take them out. To cure them.
Yeah.
Which is also one of the best lines in the movie. They're like, no, we're going to kick some ass.
And then Tobey Maguire's like, we're going to cure some ass.
It's great.
And it's like, oh, very cheesy, just like he was in his Spider-Man movies.
Yeah. No, one thing you needed to nail in this movie is you needed to have Tobey Maguire act like Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, and you needed to have Andrew Garfield act like Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, who is like sarcastic and funny, and when he's introduced, and they're like, do something Spider-Man would do, and he's hanging from the ceiling. They're like, now crawl around. He's like, I'm not going to crawl. Like, he's so snarky and funny. Yeah.
He's personally, Andrew Garfield is my favorite Spider-Man.
I think he's great. I think he's great, and it sucks that those movies were bad.
It does suck, especially because like he was originally supposed to be the Spider-Man in the MCU, was supposed to be Andrew Garfield,
right,
and then ended up getting like canceled and
all
kinds of weird stuff, and they ended up recasting him. But so basically, they're all like fighting. Like Electro shows up, and they start fighting him, and then the Lizard shows up, and like they're all each like fighting a different bad guy, and it's not working.
Right.
And they're like, Peter, we need you to give me the cure. And he's like, I don't even know which one of you guys are talking. Like,
oh, okay.
Yeah. And then that's when the Peter 1, Peter 2, Peter 3 thing comes out. And
okay.
We all need to work together. Like, you didn't miss much at all. Because I feel like you walked out, and then a little bit later, they started playing it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I'm glad I didn't miss too much.
Yeah, you missed maybe like 2 minutes of action where they were just getting their butts kicked a little bit.
I was just like, God damn it. Like,
yeah.
The climax of the movie, the big fight scene, and I have to go make sure my car windows aren't broken.
Yeah, and then that happens, and it's like, we need to work together. They're like, well, we've never worked on a team before. Toby and Andrew say that, and Tom Holland's like, well, luckily for you guys, he's like, I'm actually part of the Avengers. And then Tobey Maguire's like, dude, that's so awesome, good for you. He's like, what is that?
Yeah.
Andrew Garfield's like, is it like a band or something?
Right, and that's a fun thing for fans, especially to be like, because we all know these Marvel characters, we know these Avengers movies.
Yeah.
So to then throw people into the MCU who aren't aware of the MCU is just like inherently funny. Like, I like that idea a lot of like
there's other super people? Like, what? Yeah.
So I think that's really cool. And then you get the Doc Ock shows up, and it seems like he's going to team up with the bad guys, and
that scene was kind of dumb.
I like that. I
just don't understand like why he just grabs the Spider-Man for no reason.
I think it's like trick Electro into thinking that he's going to be on their side, that way he can pull the arc reactor out of him. I just like it just because I like the turn in that character.
Yeah,
and
a good guy.
Yeah, and I like that he was always a good guy. It was just this device that had taken him over, and so I really liked him in this movie.
Yeah, he's good for sure.
And then we move into probably this would be like one of the problems I have with this movie. You get Tom Holland fighting Green Goblin at the end. And one thing that's weird about this is how Green Goblin became Tom Holland's bad guy instead of Tobey Maguire's bad guy. To me, I think it's like that first Tobey Maguire, the Sam Raimi movie, the first one is like probably my favorite one. And so I associate Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man with Green Goblin.
Yeah.
So then to not have it, to have the confrontation be between him and Tom Holland's Spider-Man, I thought was a little odd. But then again, it's like, obviously he killed Aunt May, and so he wants that revenge and everything. And it's sort of like this, again, like this dark turn for Spider-Man where he's like, oh, I'm not going to send you back. Like, I'm going to kill you myself.
Yeah.
And part of my issue with that is like, it's Tom Holland who looks like he's 12 and he's talking about murdering people.
Oh, I thought Tom Holland looked so much older in this movie. I was like, he does not look like he belongs in high school anymore at all. I was like, he looks like a grown-ass dude.
I guess you're right, but it feels different seeing Tobey Maguire deliver that.
Yeah.
And again,
I felt like it worked out really well because I thought the Green Goblin's like when the serum is working in Norman or whatever, he's the most sinister.
Right.
So I thought it made sense for him to be the main villain.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, because there's not I mean, Mysterio's not in it. Vulture's not in it. So
Because there's not like a Tom Holland bad guy in this movie, which is so. I guess you do have to pick one of the other villains to be it. That one is one that felt like a Tobey Maguire bad guy.
Yeah.
So, the fact that the big conflict is between Tom Holland and Green Goblin.
Yeah.
It felt a little weird, but again, he's the one who's done the most damage to that Peter Parker. So it makes sense. It just felt weird when he's like going to stab him to death, and he's just been wailing on him for a couple minutes.
That fight scene was cool. Like, I liked it. Like
I said, there is a really violent nature to the action set pieces in this, which don't appear in the other two Spider-Man movies.
Like, you see Tom Holland is like hitting him as hard as he can, like to the point where he misses and he just dents the shield.
Yeah.
Which also they're fighting on a giant Captain America shield, which is
what did you think of that?
Dumb. I hate it.
I kind of like the idea of restoring the Statue of Liberty and have it be copper again. But I really hate the idea of putting a Captain America shield on it.
Yeah.
I thought that was super weird. And
if you watch Hawkeye, you already saw the shield. One thing we didn't mention is that Matt Murdock is in this movie. And it's played by Charlie Cox.
I was really hoping he'd play a bigger role. He just does the cool thing.
He is in there for 12 seconds.
And he grabs the brick that's coming through the window.
Yeah.
He's like, how'd you do that? He's like, I'm a good lawyer.
Yeah.
I really hope that character gets revitalized because I really like the Netflix series.
I have not seen it, so I can't.
It has some of the best choreographed fight scenes and like in a really brutal like fight scenes.
Yeah.
It's cool to see the way they work those all out because like he is a really good fighter, but it also shows him like getting the shit beat out of him too.
Yeah.
And so he feels like a character you can maybe like identify with more. Like, yeah, he's blind and he has this other sense, but he's also not just like Captain America swinging around like beating the hell out of people. You know, he's not Spider-Man with all this extra strength and extra senses.
Yeah.
It's just like a guy who's blind but is also a good fighter. And I would definitely recommend that, which is what bummed me out when those moved away from Netflix and it kind of felt like they were never going to come back.
Yeah.
There's like the Jessica Jones series and then the
Luke Cage and
what is it, Iron Fist. Those are not very good. The one they really need to keep is Daredevil. He was great. And
Punisher too, from what I've heard.
Which is funny because that's a spinoff essentially of just Daredevil.
Yeah.
And that's great too.
Because the dude who plays Kingpin in Daredevil he's in Hawkeye too.
Yeah. So that's again, I just love how all this stuff gets tied in together. It's so much fun. So so the climax of the movie, we get away from the fights and everything, and everyone's been cured. And then like we talked about, like the ending with Doctor Strange, kind of he's going to erase everyone's memory of Peter Parker. It then leads to like I think one of the most awkward scenes I've ever seen in a movie, where Peter's like going to go and reintroduce himself to MJ. And
it is super awkward, but I think it's supposed to be too. But it is so awkward,
and it feels really long. He like can't quite get the lines out he wants to.
The whole thing of the ending of this movie reminds me of Return of the King. I'm like, oh, it's over. I'm like, oh, it's not over. It's not. It's still not over.
There's too many long silences.
Yeah.
And them just looking at each other, and Tom Holland getting teary-eyed.
Yeah. If you're MJ and you don't know who this is, you're like, who the fuck is this weird dude in the coffee shop right now?
But she seems to also kind of, then she like starts to be into him.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I'm sure she's attracted to him.
Yeah. I mean, it's Tom Holland. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I really thought was going to happen, because it sort of felt like the scene was set up that way. Peter Parker walks into the coffee shop where MJ works, and then Ned walks in after him, and she like waves to Ned.
Yeah.
She goes and grabs the donut for Ned, and I really thought, I was like, she's going to lean in and kiss him.
Oh,
like they're dating.
That would have been weird. Yeah.
And that would have been like such a crazy change and blow to like Peter Parker and stuff. I was like, oh, I like really thought that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And then it ends up kind of being a really awkward flirty scene between MJ and Peter.
Yeah, but he chooses not to tell her that he used to date her and that he's Spider-Man and all that stuff.
Right.
Because he notices a little scratch on her forehead again. He's like, oh.
Yeah.
That's because of me, and you could die if you're with me. And
I like,
he does the right thing. He does the thing that Peter Parker would do.
I like
Absolutely.
that. You can just get to that part of the scene way sooner and with a lot less awkward silence.
It's the same thing in the original Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire at the end, because he's like can like be with MJ if he wants to, and he's like, no, I can't because I'm Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And then we get Peter Parker in his first apartment, which you mentioned before we went to
the movie.
You were joking around them.
We can't. They're like, there won't be any more home movies anymore. And I was like, the next one will be like Spider-Man, Peter Parker's new apartment. Like, and then that's how the movie ends.
Yeah, and it's like supposed to be like similar to the apartment that Tobey Maguire had in Spider-Man 2.
Isn't it a similar line to?
Yeah, he's like
from the landlord.
Yeah, he's like, rent's due on the 1st.
Yeah,
and
don't
then
be
you
late.
you see Tom Holland with his GED study book, so he's not going to MIT anymore.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And he's going to he's sewing his own Spider-Man costume.
Yeah. I want to get into the costumes real quick. I was kind of waiting for the end to bring it up.
Yeah.
They really went wild, putting as many Spider-Man costumes as they could. That way they could sell as many action figures as possible.
There are a total of 7.
It is
including if you include Andrew and Toby's.
okay. I mostly just mean like Toby. I mean, Tom Holland's.
Yeah.
He's got his black and red one.
You got the black and red one. Then
and he
he's
has
got,
it inside out.
Yeah, which a lot of people didn't realize that. And I was like, yeah, it's so you can see all the technology. And
Yeah,
stuff.
no,
there's also a smartphone duct taped to his chest.
I liked the look of that. I thought it was fun. I thought in the trailers it kind of looked like maybe it was going to be a suit with
like made by Doctor Strange.
Yeah, like imbued with magic, and that's why it was like black and gold.
Yeah,
but I still it's an interesting look.
Yeah,
and then you have his suit again with some of the nanotechnology in it, which adds like a gold spider to it. And then
integrated suit.
Yeah,
yeah.
And then you have
the Iron Spider suit, which is the worst.
Oh, it's so boring.
I fucking hate it so much. And like he has these cufflinks on his wrist in the Iron Spider suit, which, like physically speaking, he wouldn't be able to do this.
Yeah, you're right.
I know you guys can't see me,
but you're pantomiming it.
Yeah, I'm lifting my wrists up, and he wouldn't be able to do that, which means he wouldn't be able to shoot his webs at people.
Yeah, that is like my least favorite.
Yeah, I don't like it at all.
And I think it was just so.
It was like it worked in Infinity War.
Yeah,
and he didn't need it after that.
I think it's just so they can have a fun line for Doc Ock to say, where he's like, "Oh, we have competition," because he's got the spider arms.
Well, and then the nanotech helps him defeat Doc Ock too. Yeah,
and then you have his suit at the end, which is like this really shiny blue.
Yeah,
and it's neat. It's interesting. And I like that. Like
it's very comic book like accurate.
Yeah,
it's supposed to be the thing. Yeah,
and it's cool because now he's like a different Spider-Man now.
Yeah.
Like no one knows who he is. He doesn't have like the advantage of all the Stark technology. He's like just Spider-Man now.
Yeah.
And so
it's a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder what it will be. I wonder if we'll be taking pictures of Spider-Man.
Yeah. So it's fine. There's just so many costumes in this, and it just screams to me like, oh, let's put out as many action figures and stuff as we can. And that kind of stuff bugs me. But it's whatever.
Yeah.
I usually am a big fan of costumes, so I was like, too many in this. He has a different costume every scene.
Yeah, he does literally have a different Spider-Man costume. Every single fight scene, at least, it's a different one.
Right. Okay, so we're wrapping this one up. On a scale of 1 to 10 Spider-Man costumes, how many do you give this?
I mean, for what it is, I'm giving it a 10.
Right.
I think it did. It's obviously not like a film that I'm judging like I would like a Ari Aster film or something like that. Like it's obviously very different.
Right.
As far as comic book movies go and superhero movies go, I think it hit home run out of the park. I don't think they missed any beats. There's some stuff that cognitively speaking, like maybe doesn't work necessarily, but I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I got to see all 3 Spider-Man on screen at the same time, and I'm happy. It's 10. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, like I said, like there's some movies that are really fun to sit down and watch because they make you have to think about them. They make you work for it. And like we have a podcast coming out on Incendies finally. That's one we've been talking about doing for a long time. And that movie is like, what a wild ride you're on, and there's so much unraveling in the story. But that's like kind of a movie that it makes you think, it makes you sit back, and you're kind of have to exhale and like handle what you've been through.
Yeah.
And this movie is not that, and that's fine because
it's a roller coaster.
Yeah.
This isn't a ride. This is not the same type of thing. Yeah.
And sometimes I just like to see a spectacle, and that's what this movie is, and it totally nailed that for me. And it is, and another thing about it is it feels different than other Marvel movies. It's just a little bit weird in how it's made. And so I think I rated Black Widow really highly, and I feel like I need to rate this one higher because I liked it a lot. But I think I gave Black Widow like an 8.
Yeah.
So I'll give this is 8.1 Spider-Man costumes because this is definitely better than that. And I think I maybe went a little buck wild when I saw that, and I was just really hyped to be back in a theater when that came out.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I like this a lot. I thought it achieved exactly what I wanted, even though I kind of knew what was going to be happening in it in terms of like the big reveals. It was still, you said, you get to see all 3 Spider-Men. It's fun.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's okay to just have fun.
Yeah. And it's fine.
Right.
Yeah. Quick shout out to Andrew Garfield getting redeemed by saving MJ from falling.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's crazy. He starts like tearing up a little bit. She's like, "Dude, are you okay?"
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that part a lot. He's
I just think he's an amazing actor to begin with. Like he just everything that Andrew Garfield is in, I think he does a great job.
You've seen Hacksaw Ridge?
Yeah,
Oh, that's an amazing movie.
It
He
is
is
very good.
fantastic.
so everything that he's in. Like there's that one movie where I started watching it the other night and I fell asleep, but he plays the dude who wrote Rent.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it's very good from what I've seen so
Oh,
far.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've always liked Andrew Garfield.
So like Kevin Feige wanted him in
Yeah, right.
more, and like there's something to do with like an illness or something, and when they were trying to shoot, and like, well, guess we have to recast or I don't know, something weird like that.
It is cool to see him back in that role and, like you said, be redeemed not only as a character but as like that actor finally being able to like kind of close out that role on
Yeah.
like a really high note, which is what I think Andrew Garfield deserved
Yeah, absolutely.
for what he did for those Spider-Man movies.
I wonder if he'll be back in like the Sony universe or something.
That'd be wild.
Because in that Morbius preview, there's a painting of Spider-Man on the wall and it says "murderer" across it.
You know what's funny about that is that's actually a screenshot from one of the PlayStation Spider-Man games.
Really?
Yeah. So it's not even like from like the costume is the Tobey Maguire costume.
Yeah, no, it's a Tobey Maguire costume. Yeah,
So there's a lot of like
but then
speculation
Michael
on that,
Keaton
too.
is in it.
I don't understand what is going on in
Me
that Morbius
either.
movie. That feels all over the place, and it doesn't matter because you can just explain it away and have it.
I
enter
probably
the
won't
MCU.
see it in theaters at least because
Oh,
I
yeah.
fucking hate Jared Leto.
Right,
but-
right. It also doesn't look very good.
No, it looks like shit.
But it is kind of wild to think like, how are they going to put all these together? Because
Yeah.
that's the
Just imagine Batman if he was really Batman. That's
Yeah.
what Morbius is.
I love in the trailer. He's like, yeah, I have some kind of bat echolocation and I have some kind of bat sense, and he just keeps talking. And he's like, yeah, and I thirst for blood. It's like, just say like, oh, I'm a vampire now.
Yeah.
Just say it. He's like describing everything the vampires
Vampire
do.
is, yeah.
It's so silly. All right, with that, let's wrap this one up.
Okay.
You can find our podcast on any platform that you want to find a podcast on, like Apple Music or Spotify. We also upload all these to YouTube. Go ahead and leave a comment. Suggest something we should watch, or tell us what we're doing well, tell us what we're doing wrong. And with that, thank you for listening to Now This Is Podcasting.